Good evening. You're watching the news tonight, your daily roundup of all that has happened across India and the world. I'm Ishan Russell, and tonight our focus is, of course, on Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the United States, where he's been talking about, with the G4 leaders, about India's place at the UN Security Council. We'll be talking about all that and more, what happened at the G4 summit with a special guest as well. But first, the headlines that we're tracking right now. Prime Minister Modi makes a strong pitch for India's inclusion in the UN Security Council. Joint statement by G4 nation heads asks for deadline to be fixed for UN reforms. Row within the BJP over ticket distribution in Bihar. The party brass rejects allegations that candidates finalized on the basis of money power. Countdown for the launch of AstroSat begins. The satellite will be India's first multi-wavelength space observatory. And Sania Mirza and Martina Hingis continue their superb form, clinch the Guangzhou Open for the 6th title of the year. Our top story this evening, Prime Minister Narendra Modi continues his pitch for the inclusion of India in the United Nations Security Council at the G4 summit today. Backing his statement, a joint statement by G4 nations said the UN reforms should be taken up on an urgent basis and a deadline should be fixed to achieve that.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the G4 summit with leaders of Brazil, Germany and Japan, the 4 countries that have taken the lead for pressing for UN Security Council reforms. Hosted by India, this was the first G4 summit since 2004. All 4 countries are backing each other's bid for a permanent seat of the UNSC. And on Saturday, Modi stepped up the sense of urgency to reform the world body and allow newer members in the elite club.
The reform of the Security Council within a fixed time frame had become an urgent and important task. The Security Council must include the world's largest democracies, major locomotives of the global economy, and voice from all the major countries.
His statement was backed by the other 3 countries too. They feel the world's realities had changed and must reflect in a reformed Security Council. It issued a joint statement backing Modi's pitch for a speedy reform in UNSC.
We have not as yet created these new work processes in contrast to the Agenda 2030. So we need a reform of the Security Council that better reflects the actual distribution of power in the world today.
We have text for the first time after 23 years, and the leaders felt that this was a very important occasion for the international community to mobilize support and come together for the long-delayed reform of the UN Security Council. They agreed that we must push for text-based negotiations and a concrete outcome in this, the 70th anniversary year of the United Nations, and for this purpose they will mobilize as broad a coalition of like-minded countries as possible.
The UN Security Council currently has 5 permanent members: China, France, Russia, United Kingdom and the United States. 10 non-permanent members are elected for 2-year terms. The UN General Assembly has already adopted a text-based negotiating document for reforms. The US has said it is committed to India's inclusion as a permanent member. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And we're joined by Nirupam Sen. He's a former diplomat in our studio. And Yoshita Singh, UN correspondent of the PTI, joins us from New York as well. Thanks very much, both of you, for coming in. Yoshita, we'll start off with you straight to New York because as far as the G4 summit is concerned, it was quite important. So what can we count as the main takeaways from it?
The G4 summit today was very significant given that it was happening only for the second time in almost 11 years. The first G4 summit was in 2004 and it was not at the foreign secretary level or the foreign ministers level, it was at the level of the heads of state, with Prime Minister Narendra Modi attending it, the Japanese leader Shinzo Abe, Brazilian and the German leader also. And this was a big signal and a big sort of message to the developed world and to the UN Security Council that there is need to reform the Security Council, not in any indefinite time frame, but within a fixed time frame, because that's what the joint statement that was issued after the G4 summit said, that the reform of the Security Council has to be completed in a fixed time frame, with all these G4 nations of India, Japan, Brazil and Germany being the legitimate members, the prospective members to become of an expanded Security Council. And the leaders said that there is need to reform the council because the present structure of the council is dated back to 1945 when the UN was established, and the current realities are very different. The world in which we live in is very different from what it was when the UN was established. And so developing countries, major economies like India, Brazil, Japan and Germany have a rightful place in the Security Council, and this was the message that went out from the leaders to the UN.
All right, before I go across to Nirupam Sem, Yoshida, very quickly, because the most important thing perhaps is that there are text-based negotiations that could really help push reforms in the UN, can't they?
Absolutely. The text-based negotiations is a major significant movement that has come in the Security Council reform process. So far, in all these years, the countries were only talking in, as the officials here say, in thin air, where there was no text on the table. There was not a negotiation document that people could refer to or put their points at. But now, the General Assembly earlier this month, they passed, adopted by consensus, a negotiating document, which states that now negotiations will commence on a text-based, on a text in which the member countries can put their points as to what the permanent membership should be, how the council should be reformed. So significantly, the text-based negotiations will have a major impact on the reform process.
All right, Ambassador Sen, you've been in the UN, you've been in India as a permanent mission over there. So in terms of the significance of the G4 summit today, and as far as the reforms in the Security Council go, do you think this is a real great leap forward, as many in the media are calling it?
I would hesitate to use the phrase "a leap forward." See, it is a quantum increase in the progress that was achieved. I mean, it is a very major step forward. It's a evolutionary step of very major dimensions. That is how I would describe it. And the reason, and of course, what the G4 summit was very important. What it has given, I think, is a very important thing. It is two things. One is that there should be a timeline. The second is not just that the world has changed since 45.
Right.
It obviously has changed in terms of power. But the important thing, the subtext or the unstated thing which is implied, is that the Security Council today is simply not able to do its job.
Right.
And the proof of that we have seen very dramatically in the flood of refugees that are destroying Europe's economies. Because what is the origin of these floods of refugees? The origin are the wars that were waged on the basis of this newfangled doctrine of responsibility to protect in Libya, earlier in other major countries in the Middle East. So obviously, you see, the G4 is not saying that only the G4 would be permanent members. They're also saying that 2 countries from Africa would be permanent members.
Right.
Now, if the 2 countries from Africa, let us say, had been permanent members, or together with India, it is impossible that the kind of bombing that took place in Libya, leading to a flood of refugees, would have taken place. Because the African countries would have done what they didn't have the power to insist on now, which is that the negotiations with Gaddafi are going somewhere. They should be taken to a successful conclusion without the bombing.
All right, important point.
So that is the point.
Yeah, important point you raise over there, and I want to get in Yoshita's comments on that as well. Yoshita, of course, the African states and the fact that the statement also stresses on the need for adequate representation of Africa and small and medium-sized states. So what were you getting from the leaders over there?
Yes, Africa, I mean, it's well known that about 70% of the work in the UN deals with Africa, but Africa is not represented at all in the UN Security Council. So this is what India and the other countries are saying, that how can a country or a continent on which the Security Council sort of spends 70% of its time is not represented in the council, and also smaller member states. I mean, there are a lot of growing economies, emerging economies who have a say in the world economic order now, and they should also get representation in a council reformed.
All right, very quickly, Yoshita, because I know you have to go, but what about the resistance to the expansion of the Security Council and other reforms? I mean, there are countries who are really not on board, and they are the big ones.
Clearly, obviously, there is a lot of resistance, particularly from the permanent members who don't want to give their veto power that they have. And that's one of the main contention points between the developing countries and between the countries who want the reforms and the permanent 5 members. Because the developing countries, those who are aspiring to be the Security Council permanent member, they want the veto too in their hand. They don't just want a council that is expanded and they don't have the veto power. So veto is a very crucial point, which obviously the permanent 5 members don't want to give away. So as the negotiations move forward, this will remain to be seen as to how flexible or how willing will the permanent 5 members be to give the veto powers to new incoming permanent members.
All right, Yoshita, thanks very much for coming in from New York and getting us the latest as far as the G4 summit is concerned. Ambassador Sen is with us. And Ambassador Sen, now let's look at it from a larger perspective, the larger picture as far as UN reforms go and India's position. It's certainly a movement forward, as you pointed out, but there's still a long distance to go. And as Yoshita was mentioning over there, the crucial question of veto power, would we be able to get that? How far are we from seeing widespread reforms that have been quite due in the UN for some time now?
Look, I personally don't think that the veto is such a stumbling block. The stumbling block is the question of not willingness to share power. See, to keep an exclusive club exclusive. I don't want any fresh members. That is the main point in terms of power and politics. Because veto, you see, there are solutions possible. I mean, you could have a voluntary restraint on the veto, or even a constitutional restraint till a review process. Let us say a review that could happen after 5 years or 10 years. So there are solutions which have been on the table earlier. The point is not that. The point is that certain countries, mainly the United States, China and Russia, again for very different reasons, each of them, do not want new members. Now, even the United States, for instance, it says that we can have 2 or 3 new members or 3 or 4. We can't have 6 or 7 new members. Now, the point is this is a deeply mistaken view. And because the United Nations Security Council is not a company. They are the permanent members. They are not the CEOs of a company. The question of efficiency which the USA raises, it is not a question of efficiency in the United Nations Security Council. As the Prime Minister also pointed out in his speech to the General Assembly, it is a question of credibility. And I would add, it is a question of optimality. A decision, we saw the wrong decisions on Iraq and Libya, for instance. Now the point is that a decision that is taken must have optimality, which will be there if important major countries, particularly from the developing world, Africa, India, Brazil, are there. That is one. Second is that decision, after it has optimality, should be seen to have legitimacy and therefore acceptability, so that you will be able to enforce that decision without the use of force. So you can see clearly that the arguments being put forward by the United States, China and other countries are deeply, deeply flawed. Now, the other point I would like to quickly make is on the question of the text. Now the point is that, you see, this is not simply, we have to be very frank with ourselves. This whole question is not purely an external problem. It is also an internal problem in ourselves. It is not that texts were not available earlier. Texts were available in the shape of resolutions by the G4, by the L69 group, which included African countries and small island states, which we had set up. So texts were available, only we never put it to the vote, except once on the night of September 18, 2008, when we threatened a vote. And America, Russia, China and the Uniting for Consensus buckled. Let me make that clear. And that is the time when the open-ended working group, which was blocking reform, was dissolved virtually. And for the first time, a decision was there on negotiations in the General Assembly. So the next step now has been the text space. But even on the text space, you see the text has views of all the countries, including our opponents. So even on the text, unless we are prepared to vote, and surely it is a paradox that the largest democracy in the world has been so hesitant to take to voting. So we have to put individual things to the vote, only then can we move the text forward. So in other words, part of getting to the timeline rests on ourselves.
All right, the onus is on us. Of course, it's a move forward, but the timeline, though, has been defined, but still a long time to go to see those reforms in the UN and India's seat in the UNSC. Ambassador Nirupam Sen, thank you very much for coming in and helping us understand this issue a little better. Well, we'll continue with our special coverage of Modi in America every day, as long as the Prime Minister is there. Our continued coverage, of course, continues on Rajya Sabha TV. Well, time for us to take a very quick break. Coming up on the other side, after raids, the CBI books Himachal Pradesh Chief Minister Veerbhadra Singh for amassing disproportionate assets. More on that on the other side. Welcome back. You're watching the news tonight. Now to a special from the Bihar elections, verdict 2015, and the BJP is battling controversy over ticket distribution in Bihar. Party state MP R.K. Singh has alleged that the candidate list has been finalized on the basis of money. The BJP, though, rejected the allegations, claiming the Central Election Committee was the final authority that was picking candidates.
BJP has found itself in a spot after its own lawmaker alleged exchange of money to decide list of candidates. The remarks came after a number of senior leaders quit or have protested against denial of ticket in the forthcoming assembly polls.
मुझे जबकि बताया गया कि जिस तरह से टिकट बंटवारा हुआ है तो मुझे लगा कि कार्यकर्ताओं की नाराजगी में दम है। आप क्रिमिनल्स को टिकट दे देते हैं, मतलब क्रिमिनल को आप ज्वाइन नहीं कराए और उसके पहले टिकट दे दिए, उसके बाद ज्वाइन कराए। ऐसे ऐसे ये और जो सिटिंग है आपके उनका काट दिया आपने, जो जीतने वाला है सिटिंग उसका काट दिया, क्योंकि वो आपकी जी हुजूरी नहीं करता था, यहाँ के नेता की जी हुजूरी नहीं करता था।
BJP has denied tickets to 16 MLAs so far. Prominent among those who quit from party post is former Minister Chandra Mohan Rai. However, the party refuted Singh's allegation. BJP said a lot of thought went into deciding the candidate list finalized by the party's Central Election Committee.
जब भी भारतीय जनता पार्टी में कोई टिकट का बंटवारा होता है, बहुत सोच समझकर होता है और बिहार का जहां तक प्रश्न है, बिहार में भारतीय जनता पार्टी अपने बीजेपी लेडी एनडीए को यह सबको एक भारी बहुमत हासिल होगा.
It could be an individual viewpoint, but certainly there is a process which is a very, very democratic process in the party through the Central Election Committee and the Parliamentary Board. They come together, they decide on the ticket distribution, and so therefore nobody should be raising question on the decision of the Central Election Committee.
टिकट का फैसला पार्लियामेंट्री बोर्ड करती है, इसमें पार्टी के सारे बड़े नेता रहते हैं. देखिए, हर चुनाव के बाद इस तरह के आरोप हम लोग को झेलना पड़ता है. ये कोई पहली बार नहीं है. जिनको टिकट नहीं मिला, जिनके मन के अनुसार टिकट नहीं मिला, तो कोई भी आरोप लगा देते हैं. लेकिन बीजेपी ने किसी अपराधी को टिकट नहीं दिया है.
Several sitting MLAs who were denied tickets have alleged that tickets were given not on the basis of merit. Some have even joined rival camps with hopes to contest the elections. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
And Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar also took a dig at the BJP over ticket distribution while addressing a rally today in Samastipur. He claimed that the NDA is fractured over seats ahead of the polls. He also criticized the centre's financial packages announced by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in his earlier rallies.
Setting the tone of development as a core agenda for the upcoming Bihar Assembly elections, Bihar Chief Minister Nitish Kumar addressed the first election rally on behalf of the Janta Parivar in Samastipur on Saturday. Addressing a large crowd, Nitish assured that if voted back to power, his party will ensure electricity for every house by next year. He also promised that every student will get an education credit card and every unemployed youth will receive financial help from the government for a period of 2 years. He also criticized centre's financial packages announced by the Prime Minister during his rallies as an attempt to polarize voters.
हमने उसके बारे में प्रमाण के साथ बता दिया कि 1,25,000 करोड़ रुपए में से 1,08,000 करोड़ रुपए की योजनाएं पुरानी है, 87% योजनाएं पुरानी है, 10,000 करोड़ की योजनाओं का कोई अता पता नहीं है. ये पूरा का पूरा पैकेज का ऐलान एक धोखा है.
Nitish also took a dig at NDA allies in his speech. He claimed that the allies have no unity on seats distribution, with several leaders expressing disappointment, especially in BJP.
जिस प्रकार का कुल तौर तरीका है, बाहुबली, धन बल, प्रचार बल, इसी के सहारे वो चुनाव लड़ते हैं और चुनाव जीतना चाहते हैं। इसलिए उनके अंदर से ही आवाज उठी और किसी दूसरे को कहना नहीं पड़ा है। भारतीय जनता पार्टी का यही चरित्र उजागर हुआ।
He also took on the Prime Minister, accusing him of not fulfilling his earlier poll promises on black money and other issues. Bureau Report, Rajya TV.
Now, the 50-year countdown for the launch of ISRO's milestone mission AstroSat has begun. The Indian rocket carrying 7 satellites, including the AstroSat, will blast off on Monday at 10 a.m. from the first launch pad at Sriharikota in Andhra Pradesh. AstroSat will be the country's first dedicated multi-wavelength space observatory, helping scientists better understand the universe. The 44.4-meter tall, 320-ton PSLV XL version is a 4-stage rocket with 6 strap-on motors for additional thrust during the initial phase of flight. The first and third stages are powered by solid fuel, while the second and fourth are powered by liquid fuel. AstroSat will have a lifespan of 5 years. It will observe the universe through optical, ultraviolet, low and high-energy X-ray components of the electromagnetic spectrum. Most other scientific satellites are capable of observing only through a narrow wavelength band. In 2008, ISRO had launched 10 satellites in one go, and now they will be launching 7 satellites for the 3rd time in ISRO's history.
We are different from many of the people who have done, because in a common platform we are able to provide from X-ray to far UV, and also we have put a set of sky scan monitors which can pick up any transient, and then you can configure the satellite for looking at those transient object studies. So in fact, these are some of the new features.
It's time now to take a look at other national news stories nationwide. The FTI students on strike have proposed to call off the hunger strike once the government finalizes a date to hold talks. The students expressed their willingness to talk in order to resolve the issues related to Gajendra Chauhan. This comes even as the government seems to have laid down a precondition for the dialogue. The general strike by the students completed its 107th day today. The CBI today registered a disproportionate assets case against Himachal Pradesh Chief Minister Veerbhadra Singh. The agency carried out raids at 11 places in the state, including the CM's residence in Shimla and in Delhi. Veerbhadra Singh is accused of amassing wealth of over 6 crore rupees, which is disproportionate to his known source of income while serving as Union Minister for Steel. Normal life was affected in Karnataka as pro-Kannada outfit observed a 12-hour statewide Bandh today, demanding implementation of the Kalasa-Banduri Canal project. They demanded a quick resolution of the water-sharing dispute with the neighbouring states Goa and Maharashtra. The Bandh was supported by several trade unions as well as the Kannada film industry. Activist Medha Patkar and some of her associates were arrested in Allahabad today. They were going to a village where farmers held protests and clashed with police against land acquisition by the UP government for a power plant. A case against Patkar and the others has been registered for not taking prior permission to visit the sensitive area. Now, the United States and China have reached a consensus on curbing economic cyber espionage. This was decided in a meeting between US President and his Chinese counterpart. However, Obama threatened to impose sanctions on Chinese hackers who persist with cyber crimes. Jinping, meanwhile, also pledged to limit greenhouse gas emissions in China.
The US President proposing a toast to Chinese President Xi Jinping during the state dinner at White House, endorsing Sino-US friendship and peace.
May they work together like fingers on the same hand, in friendship and in peace.
The US and China concluded their summit with tentative commitments, setting aside their differences and discussing two very sensitive issues: the alleged Chinese cyber attacks on the US and Chinese island building in the South China Sea. Warning that the cyber crimes must stop, Obama also threatened to impose sanctions on hackers who persist. The deal covers the theft of trade secrets but not national security information. But not one to be bogged down by threats, Jinping said the simmering tensions over cyber theft should not be politicized.
美方在这方面呢，如果有关切，我们都可以通过既有的渠道来表达。 中方会认真地对待美方提供的任何信息。现在呢，已经，将来呢，还会。
Xi Jinping also said China was committed to resolving South China Sea disputes in a peaceful manner, adding that construction there did not target any country.
And I reiterated the right of all countries to freedom of navigation and overflight and to unimpeded commerce. As such, I indicated that the United States will continue to sail, fly, and operate anywhere that international law allows. I conveyed to President Xi our significant concerns over land reclamation, construction, and the militarization of disputed areas, which makes it harder for countries in the region to resolve disagreements peacefully.
The US and China also outlined new steps to cut down the greenhouse gas emissions. China said it would commit $3.1 billion to help developing countries reduce carbon emissions. The summit ended on a positive note, with both sides agreeing to stick to their commitments. The state dinner was attended by Washington's elite, including former US Secretary of State and Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Time now for all the sports action and sports beat. Top-seeded Indus Swiss pair of Sania Mirza and Martina Hingis continue the unbeaten run this season. The pair clinched the Guangzhou Open title by defeating unseeded Chinese pair of Xu and Yu in straight sets. This was Sania's fifth title this season, partnering Hingis. It includes 2 Grand Slam titles, the US Open and the Wimbledon doubles crown. Brazilian football star Neymar's assets worth €31 million were frozen for alleged tax evasion. The Barcelona striker is accused of not paying €10 million in taxes between 2011 and 13. The judge froze 3 times the amount for security reasons to cover potential interest and fines. For the first time, Swiss authorities investigating corruption in World Football governing body FIFA have pointed fingers at the top boss, Sepp Blatter. The Swiss Investigation Authority is investigating Blatter on suspicion of criminal mismanagement. The authorities suspect him of signing a contract that was unfavorable to FIFA and making a disloyal payment to European football chief Michel Platini. Nico Rosberg defeated teammate Lewis Hamilton to pole position at the Japanese Grand Prix. This was Rosberg's first pole since the Spanish Grand Prix 4 months ago. Rosberg is 41 points behind Hamilton with 6 races remaining this season. Well, that's news tonight. Good night.